Hello, I am very happy to be here today speaking with Jim Anderson of J. Anderson Woodworks. My name is Deborah Rosinski with Bainbridge Arts and Crafts. I'm executive director, and it's really a privilege as part of my job to get to talk to you today. And so thank you for joining me.
So I'm a 24-year Army veteran, and my last studio assignment was here at JBLM, and we fell in love with the area and decided to retire here. And as I was transitioning out, I became involved in the Museum of Glass's Hot Shop Heroes program, and that kind of opened the door for me as a veteran transitioning who had a lot of medical issues out of the military. So
you've been retired from the military now for a number of years and started learning about woodworking at a local community college, right? Can you tell me more about how you got started there?
Well, I think my passion for woodworking, well, first off, hi, Deborah. Thank you so much for having me on, for putting this together, and more importantly, for having me here at exhibition. I am so honored to be able to show there, and thank you. I would say my passion for woodworking started around 2003-04. We were on a combat deployment to Iraq, and we were living in this basically like a concrete skeleton of a building, and it just really provided overhead cover, and we complained, and eventually they gave us a bunch of plywood and 2x4s and some tools and said, make whatever you guys want to make. And when we weren't on combat missions or sleeping, we were building stuff. And we built all kinds of furniture. We built bunk beds, we built tables, chairs, end tables, coffee, book. I mean, we made it all. Now, mind you, this was my first time ever doing any of that stuff, and a lot of the guys as well, and it just kind of held together. I think we had a few collapses, and that kind of started my interest in the woodworking, and from there, it kind of evolved into, I was making cornhole boards for a lot of my coworkers and friends, and as I saw retirement in my future, I decided to, on a side job, if you will, invest in a woodworking company, and so I opened J. Anderson Woodworks in 2015. And originally, I wanted to make the game boards and simple things, and it morphed into everything from cutting boards to fine decorated inlaid wine boxes to massive oak cabinets that are done in Gustav Stickley style, 130-year-old technique. So I kind of really wasn't satisfied just making one product over and over, and it just kind of morphed, and I've learned how to do really all kinds of woodworking techniques, disciplines, and as I get the ability to learn more, get the materials, get the tools, I just am so fascinated with continuing to grow. Now, answering your question, I attended Bates Technical College and graduated in 2019. I basically learned all of the foundations, all the basics of woodworking that I needed to know. So I know how to repair all my machines. I know how to zero them correctly. I can, I'm a self-sufficient, fully qualified woodworker. And what that has really enabled me to do is, as I discover new techniques or I see something and try to figure out how I can incorporate that into my woodworking products or into my artwork, I really kind of pushed myself and continue to try to gain more skill sets and gain more things that I can incorporate into my art.
Well, I'm sitting in front of your first armillary sphere piece, which you've done a whole series over time, including some very new ones for this exhibition. And we're so excited to show them the technique and the skill and the dedication you put into each one. It's really, truly impressive. And there's a whole story behind the choices of woods that you've shared with me that I would love for you to talk more about, and reasons behind using such a variety of woods and quantity of types of woods.
That piece behind you, which is called Armillary Sphere, for me, that was my transformational piece as I kind of in 2019 going into 2020. I had, I had graduated school, and I wasn't having fun. I wasn't getting satisfaction as a woodworker, and I didn't really see myself going that path. And I've always been an artist, and once I learned all this good foundation for woodworking, I'm just so fascinated with how beautiful wood is. There's so many different colors, the grain, the texture. Wood is amazing. And what I really try to do in my artwork is to show off how beautiful it is and the different ways it can be shaped or twisted or joined, or steam bent and put together in a way to really show how dynamic I think wood is as a medium. And when I was designing the Armillary Sphere, my first one, I was entering the National Veterans Creative Arts competition, and I had finished and won the silver medal the previous year with my Gardener's Toolbox, and I was pretty happy to have won the silver. But I figured if I was going to go all in as an artist, and if I was going to commit my time and energy, then I should try to push the envelope with woodworking. And I came up with the design for the Armillary Sphere, and when I finished it, the sense of satisfaction and joy. I had really felt that I had created something special, and that sense of pride is something so amazing. And as a veteran with PTSD and having a lot of struggles that I've experienced in my life, that has been one of the most fulfilling moments. When I finished it, and there was this sense that I have created something greater than myself, something meaningful. and that piece was special because I experimented with the steam bending to come up with the rings. Each ring has 3 different types of wood in each ring, and they're precise, and they're held together with brass rivets and burrs, and they fully spin on axis, and you can arrange them to whatever order you like. And as a veteran struggling with PTSD, I wanted to bring awareness to something that was important to me, and that was the veteran suicides. And I had lost some friends to suicide. I had lost some family members to suicide, and it's hard for me, and and I've struggled with suicide. And so what I decided to do in my design was to put 22 different species of wood throughout the whole design to bring awareness to the veteran suicide rate, which was about 22 a day. And I had a lot of challenges doing that. When I was doing the steam bending, I found out that not all wood could be steam bent. So there was a lot of different hurdles, and it was a fun journey, problem solving how to put it together. And at the time, the design shows my love for joinery. If you look at a lot of how the base is joined together, and how the design of the pyramid up to base. And it was a very special piece. And for those that don't know what an armillary sphere is, an armillary sphere is an ancient celestial tool invented by the Greeks and Chinese about 3,000 years ago, and it was used to calculate the celestial bodies in the night sky. And they remarkably used this tool until the 1600s, when they invented the telescope and other means to calculate the night sky. So this tool has been around for a very long time. They have two types. They have a Ptolemaic, where when they thought the Earth was at the center of the universe, they had the Earth in the center of the armillary sphere. And then they had the Copernican, invented by Copernicus, where it puts the sun at the center, and then everything else revolves around that. And so I was fascinated by the movie The Dark Crystal when I was a kid, and it came out in the mid 80s. And there was a scene where it had this massive armillary sphere in this giant observatory, and it was spinning around and metal, and it was pretty fascinating. And I've always wanted to be an astronaut since I was 5 years old, and I was fascinated with space. And so building something that I didn't think was possible, that armillary sphere behind you, was very meaningful to me, and how it reached into my childhood, my fascination for space, building something that I didn't think was possible, with the armillary rings and putting it all together. And it was a transformative piece for me as I transitioned from a soldier to a veteran, to a student, to an artist, an entrepreneur. And that was a very transformational piece for me, and it's very special.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story, and it speaks to so many aspects of that journey, and to your finding your place in the universe, like in a literal way almost, or redefining your place after all that you've gone through and all those transitions. It's a really rich kind of metaphor and process that you've been working with. And I'm so impressed at how deep you've gone into it, and how every joint is so carefully prepared, and every aspect of the creation of it is so perfectly done. And you're sitting in your studio, and you were kind to invite me over one time, and it's a tiny space, and you do amazing things in a tiny space. So I just want to say kudos to you for that.
I think I'm fortunate. I've definitely have struggled and still struggled with a lot of issues. I have medical issues still from my service that plague me every day, and not every day I could work, or not every day, whatever can be bothering me could significantly influence whether or not I could do my art. And I've been fortunate to be able to have found a beautiful little community in Steilacoom, Washington, and it's a great, nice little town. A lot of great community programs with the Kiwanis of Steilacoom, the Steilacoom Historical Museum Association, the local businesses. We all support one another, and they've very much embraced me as an artist. And it's great to have found such a small little place, and then to be able to create this crazy little workspace that I work in. And I'll be honest, since you visited, I've added a couple more large machines, and I don't know what I'm going to do. Well, I think it's about time to expand. But it's a great little place, and it allows me to come up here, and I found my place in the universe, or what I need to be doing at the moment to share my art, to share my passion for woodworking, for the beauty of wood, to to show off the many different ways that wood could be shaped to show off how beautiful it is.
So your armillary spheres are really Copernican, right? Would you say with the, I mean, that was my impression because you're using resin to coat the form in the center, so it glows with light, ambient light. Can you describe how you form that part of the pieces?
Sure. For I think my first 3 armillary spheres, the second 2, number 2 Celestial Compass and number 3 Event Horizon, I've decided to number them at the start of their names. I didn't really intend for those to be either a Ptolemaic or Copernican, and I decided to do that for the series that I'm unveiling at your show, just for that, and I'll talk about that later. But for the cores, I was experimenting with epoxy one day, and originally I wanted to put a glass core in the center with a wooden spindle, and that could be at the center of my armillary rings. But I couldn't find a way to be able to do that. But I was able to find that through epoxy. And so over, a lot of experimentation, I came up with a way where I take a wooden spindle and I, turn it into a little piece here, and there, I put some inlay and try to do it a little fancy, nothing too special. But then I take it and I've made these reusable molds. I just place it in there, and then I'll kind of do a little concoction of cast epoxy with mica, with dyes, with some UV color so they glow in the dark and under ultraviolet. And then what happens, I'll stick those in my pressure pot, which will shrink the bubbles down, and then I'll come up with something like this. And this is one of those wooden spindles. This one actually broke. You can see a gap there. I think I was about to finish it and it snapped, and I'm like, well, I put all that work into it, I still should use it. And then what I'll do with this, I'll put it on my lathe and machine it to the finished shape that you see at the center of the armillaries. And when I was coming up with my concept for the number 2 and the number 3 armillaries, I experimented and I did this thing and I made it. And when I finished it, it had blown my mind. And I was holding it up to the light and I was thinking, what did I create? And then I went outside, I held it up to the sun, and I got like a mini total eclipse, that this little plastic resin ball with a wooden spindle running through the center of it. And I was so blown away with what I saw that I went to my design, and I didn't scrap it. I still use similar concepts, but I started over and I completely redesigned it so that I could put that core in the audience's face, so that they can look and it's right at eye level, and they can see the crazy dynamics and how it can change from being, light from the foreground, or being backlit with a bright light, or even under ultraviolet lighting. So I created a pretty complex thing. And what I would like to say I tried to create is a miniature galaxy at the center of the armillary sphere. So if the Copernican put the sun at the center, the Ptolemaic put the Earth at the center, well, what should really be at the center is at the galaxy, and at the center of a galaxy would be a supermassive black hole. And so that's my artistic rendition of creating a black hole. And with the jets coming out with the wood spindle kind of at the center, and then it goes from there.
Wow. Well, I would say you succeeded, definitely. The first time I looked closely at one of those center core pieces, I wasn't sure if it was glass or resin or what it was, and because the sparkly trails within them. And then I saw the wood and I thought, well, that can't be glass if there's wood embedded in that. That would never have worked. They're really impressive and beautiful. And they feel like just what you describe. So
it's so fun to create this stuff, and a lot of my artwork, I think I make it so complex that and a lot of it's the different components and the different parts, and a lot of these things take a long time to build and put together and get to the finished creation, and then you have all the finished parts that you assemble and put together and hope it works. But the epoxy cores are so fun to make. When I made the 4 for the upcoming show, I wanted to create a process where I could repeat it regularly. So if I had maybe I can maybe make 2 of them and put them in my pressure pot where they have to sit for a couple of days. So I try to make it so I could produce a lot of these more regularly and frequently, and it's just so fun because honestly, what you work when you're experimenting with the different colors and doing stuff, and you put it in the pot and take it out, who knows what it's going to look like, and sometimes they look good and sometimes they don't. So that's the the art of it and the experimentation, and definitely a fun process.
you must be using a really slow setting kind of resin epoxy, if it's because the pressure pot, that's removing the bubbles from it, right? As it's setting up. Is that
the pressure pot will actually shrink the bubbles, and if it works correctly, it'll shrink them so they're smaller than what the human eye can see. I've released them too early and seen bubbles expand in the core of the epoxy a couple of times, and you can see those in some of my armillary cores where I think I pulled them out too early and the bubbles expanded a little bit. But I've done all kinds of stuff. I've had friends give me their leftover stuff. I've had stuff sitting on the shelves that I use for making a bar top. I've had and I purchased some deep pour resin stuff, and a lot of, they're all very different. They all have different consistencies. The cores that are mostly clear, they have a very thin and watery consistency, and a lot of the colors sink to the bottom. But then there's all other ones where you have maybe 15 minutes to mess around with it, and then to get it in the pressure pot because it's already going through the chemical reaction to harden, and those ones will have the more thicker swirls and the more thick density opaque colors, if you will.
Great. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to give us some insight into your process and what brought you to this point in your life and work. And we look forward to having you at the opening soon and talking to you there. Thank you so much, Jim, for taking the time to talk with me today.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for hosting this. Thank you for having me, and thank you to the BAC for this wonderful opportunity. I made I feel a pretty epic project with my I'm calling it the Great Conjunction, and it was quite a journey to finish those from start to finish, and I'm so excited to show them and for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Please stop in to see the exhibition called Art and Service, featuring Jim Anderson, Jeffrey Boughton, and Ron Stewart from November 4th through November 27th.